Nearly 300 cases have been struck off the roll in some courts in the Western Cape. Now, the shocking statistics revealed by the Department of Police Oversight and Community Safety in the province were recorded between October 2022 and March of 2023. The figures also revealed that over 70 of these cases were GBV related. The latest crime stats show crime is still rampant in some parts of the Western Cape. Let's get experts to weigh in on this discussion. We're joined by advocate at the Women's League Centre, Bronwyn Pithey, and victim support coordinator from the Mitchells Plain United Residents Association, Linda Jones, joining us in just a moment. Advocate Pithey, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. Some pretty shocking figures here. A large number of criminal cases falling through the cracks. What is your view on this?
Good morning. Thank you very much for having the Women's Legal Centre on the show with you. Yeah, look, it's unfortunately not a new picture. It is very shocking, but it's nothing new. Unfortunately, this has been happening for years. It's a very unfortunate phenomenon that happens very often in the criminal justice system. And as you can see, not only cases that involve gender-based violence, but a number of other cases also simply don't get to trial. But one of the biggest issues, obviously, that concerns us are the very high cases of either sexual offences or crime-related domestic violence matters, which don't see, when I say the light of day, what I mean really is that they never get to trial. And it's essential that we have information like this available because, unfortunately, over time, this kind of information is not readily available. And so this project that is being conducted by that department is essential for us to really get a better insight and understanding of what's happening in our courts.
Yeah. What are some of the reasons that have been put forward on why these cases are never going to get trialed?
Well, the essential, real kind of official answer or reason that is always given is that the case is not ready to proceed to trial. Most of the time it's because investigations are so-called incomplete. But there are many other reasons, obviously, that contribute to why so-called investigations are not complete. And it's what we call attrition. And the attrition rate, specifically that we are able to monitor in sexual offences, is dire. It's quite a phenomenal picture to look at if we look at it nationally. It's certainly not something that is unique to the Western Cape. It is very much a national problem where we have incredibly high levels of reported sexual offences, for example, and a very small number of cases that eventually get through and go to trial. And that is what we refer to as attrition. And although there are sometimes very good reasons, sometimes an accused can't be found, sometimes vital evidence simply cannot be processed or is not processed. But as most of us are well aware of the incredibly large backlogs that sit at the forensic science laboratories where DNA are not being processed, and for that reason many cases don't proceed. There are a number of other reasons. The delays that happen within the criminal justice system when women in particular are waiting for cases to proceed take so long to actually get to trial. Very often it could take between a year, 2 years, sometimes even 3 years for a matter to get to trial. And during that time, people are sitting with this as part of their lives. And very often people just get to the point where they say, I actually want to move on with my life and I want to get out of this and I don't want to proceed. And then that gets placed on another burden gets placed on victims to say, well, it's because of you that we haven't proceeded. But in fairness, to have that kind of thing hanging over your head for such a long period of time is really should be a criticism leveled at the system because it is not performing justice in a way that justice should be performed, which should be speedy.
So what message does this now translate into when a matter is taking this long, or perhaps now struck off and completely forgotten about, and then the victim has to live with what has happened and never see justice being served?
You've hit the nail on the head. That's really the point, is that what message are we putting out there to people who are victims of gender-based violence, the majority of whom are either women or children? And what message are we sending? On one hand, we have very, very strong government campaigns, and there are some very good programs that are going on. I'm not painting the entire government attempt at addressing domestic violence and sexual offences with one brush. But what we do need to acknowledge is that we are encouraging people to come forward to report, to come forward to authorities for assistance with promises of specialized investigations, specialized sexual offences courts, specialized services. Yet at the same time, when you look at the statistics, there's such a small chance of your case actually ever reaching trial and securing a conviction that one has to really critically look at it and say, well, is this worth it? What are the chances if, and a terrible statistic, I'm not going to rattle off lots and lots of numbers, but if we actually look at the statistics of sexual offences convictions, we have a conviction rate literally of about 5% in this country of the number of sexual offences that are reported versus the number of convictions we get at the end of the day in any 1 year. 5% really is not an encouraging number to say to victims, come forward and we will give you justice.
5% is very discouraging, Advocate Pithey. I'd like us to bring on the line now Linda Jones, who's at Mitchell's Plain United Residents Association Victim Support. Linda, very good morning to you. Thank you for your time. As you join the discussion, we know that President Cyril Ramaphosa has said that gender-based violence should be seen as a second pandemic. And Advocate Pithey has been speaking about the very strong government campaigns. But when it comes to the bigger picture, like what we're talking about now, we can see the loopholes and how cases are falling through the cracks. When it comes to the messaging that this now sends to victims, what would you say stands out?
Good morning, listeners, and good morning, Lepang. I want to agree with the first speaker that the message is really giving hopelessness to our people. Because with the stats, I don't even want to say that that's true. I think it has been doctored, and to my knowledge, being at court on a daily basis and see what's happening and how many withdrawals are taking place. I'm not sure if that is the proper stats even, to say for the least. My concern is that hopelessness and people are not going to report because they are secondary victimized again at the courts so often, because now they must sit in expectation that the case will be heard just to hear it has been struck off the roll. And what do you do as a victim right there? And often we find that we have in our communities retaliation because people are starting to take the law into their own hands because the law does not work for us. The law does not work for most of our cases. And that is serious. But the serious effect of this, we talk about specialized investigation. We don't have. We must be honest and we must be truthful. Our investigators are young guys who have just come from college and are being put in the deep end. The other investigators are overloaded with hundreds of dockets. Which docket is going to be prioritized? That is my question on a daily basis. Even here in Mitchell's Plain, we have investigators sitting with 150 dockets. Where is it going to? Who is he going to prioritize? And so, yes, our victims are being left behind to struggle. And with all due respect, with all these initiatives that our government is talking about, I don't think, because bail payments, bail money is going into our revenue. And I think, and I want to say this, I want to claim this, that the revenue is on the forefront and not the lives of our community.
Yeah. In fact, let me perhaps bring in Advocate Pithey here. Linda Jones speaks about the investigators working under immense strain and at times working with many cases, many dockets. But surely the failure doesn't justify their inability to comply with their constitutional mandate.
Not only that, they have very, very clear legislative frameworks from which to work, as well as national instructions in terms of which to do their jobs, specifically for sexual offences and for domestic violence matters. And I think Linda is absolutely correct. You know, we can talk about all of these things in theory, but the reality, the lived reality of the majority of our people is very under-resourced services that are being provided, not only by government, but government is incredibly dependent on CBOs and NGOs such as Linda's, who play a vital role in the support for victims. If we didn't have those services that are effectively funded for free for the government, that are provided for victims by community organizations, we would be in far more trouble than we already are. And I think that the issue that we can get very, very despondent about it, it's a very bleak picture. And what we really are trying to do in the bigger scheme of things is hold government responsible. So organizations like Linda's, who provide vital direct services to victims, I think are the lifeblood of the reason why we keep going. And secondly, organizations like the Women's Legal Center, which primarily does constitutional impact litigation, is that we are trying to find constantly the gaps where government can and must be held accountable for the promises they make. We have to hold people accountable. And although I have deep sympathy, seriously, I have deep sympathy for a lot of investigating officers, particularly in those FCS units, those specialized units, who most of the time have their hearts in it. I have very little doubt that they are committed, but they are so overburdened with the amount of work that they simply cannot get to everything. And so the services are of substandard. And the same must go for the prosecutors in the courts. There are some very committed, dedicated prosecutors, but the workload is overwhelming. And when I was talking about those very low statistics of cases that eventually actually get to trial and are prosecuted, can you imagine if all of the cases actually had to get that far? And I think it's for that reason, very limited resources, and I think in a lot of cases very badly managed resources. The reason that we have so few cases going through the courts is because they simply can't manage with anything more. And we really need to look at accountability structures, and that's really what we're looking at, is litigating and finding legal options and legal solutions to try and hold government more responsible and to live up to not only their constitutional mandate, but the mandates that are in all of our very good legislation, which deals with violence against women, gender-based violence, and I'm looking at sexual offences in particular, and domestic violence.
Yeah. Linda, just coming to you, I mean, as we speak about efforts that need to be made to hold officers accountable for failing citizens and not fulfilling their constitutional mandate, you, on the other end, have to deal face-to-face with the victims and interact with them and keep their hopes alive that justice will be served. I mean, what is it taking from your end to ensure that the victims do continue to have faith that people will be held accountable, those who have wronged them and hurt them will be held accountable?
Levan, we had a few very successful prosecutions since July. We having a few of our magistrates who are really going at and applying the law and seeing it through. Last month we had a gang rape where 5 guys were sentenced to 2 life sentences, plus 5 years for the kidnapping. On Thursday, we had a 71-year-old sentenced to life imprisonment, which gives me courage to speak to my victims and tell them, don't be despondent. Let us keep our hope alive. Something is happening here. And so if our courts can send these deterrent messages to the would-be perpetrators out there, I'm sure some things will change, because we cannot sit with this. Just yesterday, I heard one of the ladies of the Tutuzela Center says they could not find somebody to take the victims to the police station, and the police sent the van and they picked the victims up. And when the victim and the mother got there, they said they can't do anything. They don't know how to proceed. Man, you are trained to open the docket. And so again, luckily the lady went back to the Tutuzela Center and they got hold of FCS. So we need to keep people accountable more.
Yeah.
We need to interact with these government officials and let them know we cannot sugarcoat We cannot sugarcoat any longer. We're having elections. Everybody's running around with different promises. We cannot allow that. We need to see the proof is in the pudding.
Very well. Thank you so much for you both for coming on air and painting this very grim picture. But, of course, a glimmer of hope as there are groups and there are people really committed to the cause. Speaking there to Advocate Bronwyn Pithey, Women's Legal Centre, as well as Linda Jones, the Mitchells Plain United Residents Association's Victim Support Coordinator. Thank you both for your time.